Hello everyone, this is The Question, and I'm back with another YouTube video. This video is going to be about my reading log for the month of April. If you've been following my channel for a while, you probably noticed almost every single haul I'm grabbing at least one or two Osamu Tezuka books. A lot of the new releases that they've been coming out with, along with some of the digital manga older releases, stuff I'm finding used. I've got, I think, probably 30 to 40 Tezuka books at this time. And the thing is, I've actually read very little Tezuka. I've read some random Astro Boy stories, but not a lot of his stuff. So I wanted to dedicate the whole month of April to just trying to read through as much Tezuka as I could. And so I think I read through about 14. I'm going to, when I get to the part where I talk about what I read, I'm going to put them in order to show which ones I enjoyed the most. Out of the 14, I only had one that I didn't enjoy. If it wasn't for the fact that it was Tezuka and I was trying to read these books, I probably would have stopped reading it about halfway through. But everything else I really enjoyed, and I was surprised. I expected, especially some of these platinum manga releases, I expected that at least some of them were going to be like, they were just like trying to put out everything that he released, and so we were going to get a lot of crap. But no, there was a lot of really good stuff, really enjoyable stuff. And some of the short story collections, I mean, obviously, like most short story collections, there's going to be great stuff, there's going to be good stuff, and then there's going to be some, kind of just average or mediocre stuff, and there was definitely that. But I enjoyed it all. I enjoyed all of those books, and yeah. And one thing, I'll start off with Tezuka. Like a lot of older generation manga creators, I mean, this happens with newer manga creators also, but he has a really hard time writing female characters. In almost, I think maybe like 90% of the books I read, the female character in the book is raped. Like, I mean, that's, obviously there's going to be stories where something like that might happen, but it's and the few that it doesn't happen in, it's because they're more written for kids, those books. But almost in every other book that I read, whatever female character, whether it be a lead, a side character, is raped, sexually assaulted, so it's, that's, a little much. It's weird because on every one of these Tezuka books, there's a letter that's from the Tezuka, I think, Foundation, or whoever's in charge of making his works available to be reprinted. There's a letter about, these books were made in a different time, so there might be stuff that is seen racist nowadays that wasn't seen, that was less of an issue back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whenever these books were released. Kind of similar to what you'll see with like old Walt Disney cartoons. You'll see kind of like a little notice beforehand that says like these depictions are unfortunate type of thing. And so since I'd seen that and I've heard that, I was expecting a lot more problematic stuff regarding people of other races in these books, and surprisingly there wasn't very much. Like there's actually some really good African American characters in these books, that especially for like 50s, 60s, 70s Japan, you weren't really getting a lot of African American characters written well. Or even put in their books, other than for jokes or for I don't know, for other reasons. But yeah, so this was some of these stories had some really good characters in them. And so I was expecting more of there to be more racist stuff in here, more problematic stuff, but instead it's weird because there's no mention of how the female characters are kind of treated in these stories. And even ones where a female character is the lead or the lead character, she's getting raped or she's getting sexually assaulted regularly. Almost every character in this book multiple times is getting raped, and it's, it's a little much. So if that is a trigger for you, just a reminder, unless you're reading some of his more kid stories, Astro Boy, stuff like that, almost every single crime, drama, story that I read from him, there's a rape happening. So yeah, so just wanted to mention that ahead of time. Obviously I was still able to enjoy some of these stories, but I just wanted to make mention of that. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go in reverse order. So I'm going to start with the book. I'm going to go from my least favorite of these books to the one I like the most. And like I mentioned, this last one here is the only one that I really didn't enjoy. So all the other ones, some level of enjoyment. I think on Goodreads, this is the only one I gave 2 stars to. The other ones, got some variation of 3 stars, 4 stars. But this is the only 2-star book I had, and that was Metropolis. And this was kind of surprising. I expected I was going to enjoy this one quite a lot. But yeah, this is the oldest of the stories I read. This one was released in Japan in 1949. So obviously, 70 years old at this point. And this one is probably the most slapsticky, kind of more, definitely shows its age, I would say. It's a sci-fi story. It's about an artificially created child who escapes from its creator, and then the crux of the story is the artificial child being hunted down by this villain character called Duke Red, who wants to use the child for evil reasons. So yeah, it's the artwork is great. This artwork is definitely quite different than most of the other Tezuka books that'll be showing artwork from that I read. With this being the age, this is definitely very heavily influenced by Walt Disney. There's even some Mickey-looking characters in this story. But yeah, this one, it just kind of goes on. Like I wasn't really connecting with any of the characters or story. I did watch the anime version of this a long back when it very first came out. There was an anime movie, but from what I've read, obviously I don't really remember too much about that movie. It's been probably 20 something years since that movie came out. I remember really enjoying it, but it looks like this really doesn't have too much to do with that other than just the name and the basic premise. There's different characters in this book, or in the movie. So this was the one that I didn't enjoy. This is an old out-of-print Dark Horse book. There are some other releases by Dark Horse that are in this same format. Next World and Lost World are the other ones. It's kind of part of like just a sci-fi trilogy that he created all around the same time. But yeah, so this is Metropolis, and this is the lowest one on my list. Okay, so next on my list is Doro. This is in an omnibus edition released by Vertical. As you can see, it's a very thick book. This is an all-in-one. And this series was released in Japan between 1967 and 1969. This is another one that I was surprised. I mean, I did enjoy this book, but as you can see, it's at the low end of the books I read. This is one of the most highly reviewed books that I've seen from Tezuka, so I was expecting to like this one quite a bit more. But yeah, for me, I didn't enjoy it as much as some of the other ones you'll see farther down. So the basic premise of this one, this is a samurai story about a cursed young man who has to hunt down 48 demons in order to break his curse and reclaim his body. And then on his travels, he meets an orphan thief named Doro, who they end up bonding and travel together, helping each other out. I actually was really enjoying this. It probably would have been a lot higher up on my list. About the first third of the book, when you're kind of like being introduced to the story, the characters, that type of stuff. It starts getting too much into just episodic kind of, we go to a town, people are trying to kill us. We survive, we move on to the next town, people try to kill us, we move on. Like, it starts to get a little too much of that in kind of the middle part of the story. so I didn't enjoy that as much. And that's kind of what made it drop. It got a little repetitive. But yeah, so I don't want to spoil, I'm not going to go too much in detail of the story. I don't want to spoil stuff for people who haven't read it. But the art, like most every single Tezuka book that I'm going to show, the artwork is fantastic. He's as you can see, very detailed. Some really good characters. Just an enjoyable book. I just kind of found it, it's kind of a on the road book. It's kind of like they're just traveling from town to town is kind of the major part of the story. And that just kind of, after a little while, got a little bland to me. And the ending I didn't think was that great. But yeah, so that's Doro. Okay, so the next one on the list I read through was Atom Cat. This book was released in 1986 to 1987 in Japan. And this is pretty much a straight sequel follow-up to the series Astro Boy. And it follows a bullied school kid who loves the manga Astro Boy. And then he rescues a kitten who ends up getting all of Astro Boy's powers. So obviously I'm going to be predisposed to this story, enjoying it because it's about cats. It's got a cat as the lead character. So yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty, it's nothing great. It's just an enjoyable kind of read in the same similar style as those Astro Boy stories. So if you enjoy those, you're gonna like it. I mean, it's just a cute cat that basically has Astro Boy's powers. And as you can see, there's definitely some, the boy will be watching the old cartoon or reading the manga, and then something will happen similar in real life, and him and his cat have to solve it. So just an overall cute story. I mean, this is definitely made for, I would say definitely made for kids. One of my favorite things that I didn't mention before about almost all of these Tezuka books is that there's an afterword from Tezuka in almost all of these. And he gets really honest in them, which is awesome. He kind of, there's ones where he'll just say, no one liked this story. In the case of a book that you're going to see later on, like, everyone in Japan really didn't like this story. I was doing terribly because of how sensitive I am to that stuff. So there's a lot of really good info in those afterwards, and I wish more mangaka would put afterwards in their stories. But yeah, so this is definitely a for all ages book. Highly recommend it, especially you like Astro Boy, you like those kind of stories. We have Atom Cat, and this is still in print. I see this for cheap, so this one's an easily book to get. Okay, and next up we have Brave Dan. This was released in Japan in 1962, and this is kind of similar to Atom Cat. It's an adventure story. It's got a child lead character. I'm not sure how to pronounce what the tribe is, so I think it's an Ainu boy. So the basic story is that an Ainu boy and a tiger that becomes his friend and protector, they get wrapped up in a treasure hunt. They're trying to get keys so they can claim the treasure of the Ainu people. And then it adds in some science fiction at the end. So the afterword of this one is one of the ones I mentioned great, because Tezuka actually says in here, this, when it was being released in Japan, was not popular. It was like one of the worst times of his life because people didn't enjoy it as much as he had hoped they would. And I found it to be, an enjoyable kind of adventure series. The reason why I have this over kind of a similar type story in Doro is this one is obviously a lot shorter, so it's not as drawn out as Doro is. But yeah, I just found the story and kind of learning about the Ainu people and, this boy's bond with his tiger. It was just an enjoyable story. This is one definitely more for, it says 13 plus, but this is one of those ones that's definitely more for, you can definitely tell was made for a younger audience. But yeah, definitely enjoy this one. And this is another one that I think is pretty easily obtainable. Okay, so next on the list is Ayoko. This book was originally released in Japan between 72 and 73. This is a thicker vertical release. This is the soft cover. They did originally release it in a hardcover, but I have the soft cover here. So this is a family drama. It's about the wealthy Tenji clan who, after World War II, they end up having their land redistributed by the government. So they bribe and do other shady things to kind of keep their status and power. So the story, there's lots of infighting between the family, between the brothers, who are kind of trying to see who's going to take over after their elderly and sick father. You know, they're hoping he's going to pass away and who's he's going to leave in charge. And so the main character, or not the main character, but the named cover, the named title character, Ayoko, is a child at the start of the story, and she ends up overhearing something that she shouldn't have, and instead of killing her, the family decides to lock her in a storeroom for her entire life. So the main plot of the story is basically her going from, you know, living in the storeroom, her other family members interacting with her, what's going on with the family, you know, trying to survive in these new times. So it's just a very interesting story. I'm not going to show a lot of inside just because there's a lot of adult, like I said, content in here. But yeah, it's just there's a lot to this story. It's very detailed. I was kind of fascinated throughout, wondering where it was going to go. And it's just a really enjoyable kind of family drama. Lots of disturbing stuff in here, lots of adult themes. There's incest, a lot of inappropriate stuff. But yeah, definitely enjoyed this one. Okay, so next up we have the first short story collection. This is Under the Air. I can't show the front cover because I have the Platinum Manga edition, which actually has nudity on the cover. So I'm not going to show you that. The releases at Amazon or other places have like a black bar covering it, covering the nudity, but this Platinum Manga release did not. And yeah, so this is just a kind of standard short story collection. You've got science fiction, historical fiction, drama. It's just, yeah, just very interesting stories. None of the stories went on too long. You know, you're going to have ones that you're going to connect with more than others. These were all released between 68 and 70. And one of my favorite things about this short story collection is that it has this kind of list in the back, and it kind of shows like what the different stories are and when they were actually released in Japan. It's got a great afterword here saying why he decided to release these together. Yeah, just a really enjoyable story collection, and a really nice release from Platinum Manga. Reminds me, you know, when you think of short stories nowadays, you usually think of like Junji Ito, because there's definitely a lot of his short story collections being released by Viz. And so it's got a similar vibe to that. You know, you get some where you're like, what is going on here? And then they just kind of randomly end. And then you got some that have really good endings. Just a really good mix. If you like those type of short story collections, definitely check out Under the Air. A lot of dark stuff. Like it says here, tales that depict the duality of man, good versus evil, loving and violent. A lot of that in here. Definitely recommend this one. Okay, so next on the list is a 2-volume release, and this is Alabaster. This is actually one of the ones that I had heard the worst about, you know, that had gotten the lowest scores of the books that I had read, and I actually really enjoyed it, which I was surprised by. So the basic premise of the story, the lead of the story is an African-American athlete and basic, you know, celebrity who, you know, is famous. He ends up dating this model. They fall in love. Who is a white woman. They date for a while. He asks her to marry him. At this point, she then tells him that she was just dating him for status and that she would never marry a black man and that she never actually liked him or loved him. So he loses it, goes on a rampage. He ends up in prison. And at this point, he's pretty much given up on life. His only goal in life is revenge. He's mad at the world. So he meets a scientist there who invented an invisibility ray, and they become friends. When he escapes from prison, he gets this invisibility ray, and it ends up turning him into this kind of monster character. So that's kind of where the story starts. And then it's basically him trying to get revenge on the world. So this is not a happy story. This is definitely a dark drama story. It's got a bunch of good characters. He kind of gets together this group of other villains that he wants to, or bad guys that he wants to have help him. The old man scientist that he meets in prison has a granddaughter, so he then tries to take her and take care of her when she doesn't really want his help. But yeah, just a really interesting, weird, out there story. Kind of see if I can show some stuff. Really well drawn. I really like the artwork. It's got a cartoony, but definitely a lot of drama that you can tell throughout it. It's got some comedy, but then a lot of seriousness. As you can see, some really good darks, really good dark colors in here. So yeah, definitely give this a shot. You know, definitely don't be put off by kind of the negative stuff that people said about it. Like it said, written in a dark period of Tezuka's life, Alabaster is a thrilling revenge story that touches on the dark side of humanity and the extent one would go to get even. So he obviously is damaged heavily by this invisibility ray, but yeah, still a very engaging story. Definitely recommend this one. Okay, I forgot to mention Alabaster. That was released in Japan in 1970 to 1971. So lots of 70s stories in these ones that I read. So next up, we have another short story collection, and that is Clockwork Apple. So Clockwork Orange is actually my favorite film of all time, and similar title. He actually mentions it afterward. There's not very many similarities. He just liked the name and went with Apple. So yeah, so another short story collection, lots of different types of stories here. The very first story, one of the best ones, it's about a Nazi lieutenant sentenced to death for war crimes. He expects to escape with his life, but hubris is his downfall, like it says here on the back. A lot of really good stories about despair. As you can see here, just some really weird stuff. Just like, you know, even though these are less kind of fantastical as like Junji Ito stuff, there's just a lot of really weird stuff going on in some of these stories, and I just really enjoyed it. A lot of sci-fi, just a lot of really weird, fun stories. And like I said, I really like how they kind of mention where these stories were released. This one has a little longer time frame of when these stories were released. It actually starts with 1968, and the last story goes through 1973. And then here's the, you got the normal afterword by Tezuka. And yeah, just if you like short story collections, like I mentioned under the air, this one, definitely check out both of these. Okay, next up we have Melody of Iron and Other Short Stories. This is all from 1974. This one is not a typical short story collection because Melody of Iron is about 2/3 of this book, and then there's 2 short stories at the very end. So it's really more a Melody of Iron story. And so the main story, Melody of Iron, it follows a man whose sister ends up marrying into the mob, and he accidentally breaks their code, so they chop his arms off. And so he ends up having a scientist make him prosthetic arms, but he can only control them through telekinesis through his mind. And then while he's sleeping, his arms end up having kind of his mind while he's sleeping is sending him off doing crazy stuff. So this is just a really weird, it says on the back drama horror. I'd say more sci-fi. It's definitely it's got a lot of good, just out there. A lot of these kind of lesser known Tezuka books have some really out there stories and plots, and I really enjoyed that. We got a lot of good stuff with the mob and this guy's family. And then, like I said, 2 shorter stories here in the back. Then we got the postscript. And then kind of the normal little stuff talking about him, advertisements. But yeah, this the Melody of Iron story was really good, and then the 2 short stories were really good also. But yeah, this one out of the short story collections, this was my favorite. But like I said, it's really a main story and then 2 short stories added in at the end. And that's Melody of Iron. Really like the cover with the arms. You obviously figure that out when you're reading the story and you find out the guy got his arms chopped off. And so, yeah, it's just a kooky story. Definitely check this one out. Okay, so we're down to our last 3. So this is the 3 best books I read from Tezuka in the month of April. And at number 3, we have MW, or as it's actually pronounced, Mu. This is the darkest Tezuka book that I read. This was released between 1976 through 1978. Unfortunately, this is one of the only ones that doesn't have some sort of afterword. I would love to have heard Tezuka's opinions on this story. Obviously, I'm sure I can find something on the internet where he was interviewed about it, but no afterword in this one. And the story revolves around 2 men who are the sole survivors of a poison gas leak when they were younger. And then while they were hiding out, the older boy rapes the younger boy, and the older boy ends up becoming a priest in adulthood, while the younger boy, because of his exposure to the poison, ends up driving him insane, and he becomes a serial killer. So they continue their sexual relationship into adulthood, with the priest trying to keep the serial killer from trying to destroy the world. So this is it's a like I said, trigger warning stuff. If you have stuff, like I mentioned, there's child rape. There is very very inappropriate. This is a very dark story, considered his darkest work. So this is not for everyone. You have to know this stuff going in. But I really enjoyed it. The story, the kind of the stuff going on between the priest and the serial killer, and the stuff the serial killer does, it's kind of similar to a lot of serial killer stuff that you see nowadays, where he's kind of like a cool, suave, popular guy, but deep down he's a serial killer, and no one, everyone thinks he's just this popular, handsome, kind of cool guy. So yeah, dark story. I'm not really going to flip through it because I don't know what page I'm going to pop onto, and there would be something really inappropriate. But yeah, if you don't mind adult dark themes, then this is one to pick up. It is a big release. I think there might be a hardcover of this, but I have the soft cover, and I think the soft cover is readily available. So here we have Mu by Tezuka. Okay, so next up we have the second best book I read in the month of April, and that was The Book of Human Insects. This is another dark story by Tezuka. This came out in 1970 to 1971. It has the same similar character to the serial killer in Mu, where we have someone who is kind of a psychopath, emotionless type of character, and that is the female lead. Toshiko Tamura, she has the ability to mimic other people's talents. So she basically uses her looks, her good looks and charms to get close to talented people, and then she uses their talent to get famous before they do. So she's basically, she's kind of a stereotypical psychopath. She shows no compassion for the people she hurts. And basically this story is kind of just showing the trail of broken people that she leaves behind her and how they kind of deal with that. So she's constantly having people chase her, who are still in love with her, even though she ruined their life. There's people who, all sorts of things go on. So it's definitely got a cartoony kind of art style, but very adult, I think it's kind of drawn more cartoony than Mu is. But yeah, just a really interesting lead female character. It definitely has the same issues that, like I mentioned at the beginning, that a lot of Tezuka women have. You'll see in this story. I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, just a very interesting story. She basically treats humans as insects and kind of sucks out what she needs out of them. That's kind of why it's called The Book of Human Insects. and leaves them as husks of what they were. So yeah, this was the second best book I read. This is similar. It comes in a hardcover and a softcover. I have the softcover, and I think this is readily available also. Okay, so the #1 book I read in the month of April from Tezuka was Message to Adolf. This was originally released in Japan from 1983 to 1985. So one of his later books, and it is released in this nice 2 hardcover edition by Vertical. The story is basically about 3 Adolfs, obviously Adolf Hitler being one of them, but he's kind of just a background character in these stories. But the main story is about 2 Adolfs living in Japan. One is Jewish and one is half Japanese and half German. And they're basically friends as children. And it kind of goes through their story of the one who's half Japanese and half German ends up getting raised and brought up as a Nazi, and him trying to temper that with his friendship with his friend who was Jewish. So just a really engaging story. I'm not a huge fan of like World War II stories, so I don't read a lot about that time period normally. But yeah, this was just really engaging. Like I said, it goes from the 30s to the 80s, basically from when they were small children to late adulthood. It grabs you. The story grabs you. I read through the first hardcover, I think, in 2 sittings, and they are, like I said, really thick books. But yeah, just some really great artwork. It's definitely, Tezuka showing, kind of even in his later years, that he, is able to make just this amazing story. I'm not sure. I mean, I know this has a good reviews. I don't know if this is generally considered to be his best work. But yeah, I definitely, out of the stuff I read, this was easily my favorite. It was really engaging. Just a really good story. So that was it. That's Message to Adolf. Almost every YouTube manga creator I see has these spines on their shelves. So I'm sure most of you have probably read this, but this was my first time reading it. I remember seeing the old, I think, Viz release where they were just called Adolf, from like the 90s, 2000s when Viz released this series. I remember seeing those on the shelf where they had a regular photograph covers, not cartoon drawn. But yeah, never got around to actually checking this out, and I'm glad I did. Great. Anybody who recommended this to me, thank you. Really enjoyed it. Okay, so that was it. That was everything I read in the month of April. Like I said, a bunch of really good stories. I was hoping to get through more. I kind of thought about for a second maybe reading through Buddha this month, but with it being 8 kind of larger volumes, I didn't really want to have 2/3 of my month be on one book. So I'm glad I kind of skipped that and went through a bunch of other books. And just I started in alphabetical order, and then I kind of just randomly picked books here or there. But yeah, a bunch of really great stuff. I'm glad that it was really fun to do that, to really not read anything else other than one person. I really didn't have to think about what am I going to read this month or what am I going to read next. So yeah, definitely enjoyed it. I highly recommend all these books to, definitely check out Tezuka. Even if you only really read current manga, pick up one of these, maybe one of the higher ones on my list. Give it a shot. They're classics. He's kind of the godfather of manga for a reason, and you should definitely at least check one or two of his works out and see if you like it. So that's going to be the end of my reading log. Obviously, I'll have another haul video. I'm going to quit saying, oh, this next one's going to be lighter, because I've already gotten a crap ton of books. So it's going to be another heavy one here for May. So I'll stop saying that at the beginning of every one of my videos, that I'm surprised that I got a lot of books, because it's not surprising anymore. I just keep getting a lot of books every month. So yeah, if you like this video, if you like my content, please like and subscribe. Once again, I'm the question, and leave anything in the comments if you have any questions, want me to go into more detail about any of these books. Let me know. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.